Welcome back to Diving into Watches, and we've got an interesting review for you today. Maybe a little controversial one because I know some people are going to be really upset. I shouldn't say really upset, but there's definitely some fans of the watches I'm going to talk about today, and they're probably not going to like what I talk about, but that's okay. I'm prepared for that one. You probably already saw what the topic of the video posted. 3 reasons why I believe that the Bulova Lunar Pilot is better than the Omega Speedmaster, the Moonwatch one. There's many variations of the Speedmaster, but there's 18 variations of the Moonwatch for Omega Speedmaster. So I'm going to give my 3 reasons. We'll do a review of the Bulova over on the bench, but I'm also going to give my 3 reasons why I feel, and I think my 3 reasons are valid. I mean, obviously, people are going to tell me in the comments they're not, but why I feel my 3 reasons that the Bulova is a better watch than the Omega Speedmaster is probably going to upset some people. Now, first off, this is not a video um, ragging on or tearing down the Omega Speedmaster. It is a phenomenal watch, absolutely phenomenal watch. I would love to own one, but the prices on those range anywhere from $5,300 up to $60,000 for an Omega Speedmaster. So this is not tearing it down. This is strictly comparing the two watches that actually went to the moon and walked on the moon. Um, uh, why I believe that the Bulova Lunar Pilot is a better of the two. Just some backstory on these. Obviously, you know that the Omega NASA had a competition to see what watch they were going to have the astronauts wear, and many watches were submitted, even the Rolex Daytona, but it was the Omega Speedmaster that beat out all the watches that were submitted at the time. Bulova was not submitted because the Gemini program started back in the late 50s, early 60s, and Bulova didn't even come out there, watch the Lunar Pilot in 1972 in a prototype that Dave Scott wore on the moon, and I'll go to cover the backstory of that in a second. But Omega had won the contract with NASA to supply the Omega Speedmaster to the astronauts. It was the primary watch issued to the astronauts to wear, but many astronauts did wear other watches in space, but only two actually walked on the moon, and that is the Omega Speedmaster and the Bulova Lunar Pilot. The back history, we all know the back history of the Omega Speedmaster being the moon watch, and that is what they claim, and they not that they claim, but they use that as their fame, and they build off of that, and it's been a very, very solid watch. But there are other watches that have gone into space. One very popular one that went into space a lot, but didn't actually go onto the moon. I believe one of them went down to the moon but did not EVA, was the Rolex GMT, and that went into space several times because astronauts were allowed to bring our own personal, a few personal items in their own personal kit. And I think it was Apollo 17. I'm going to be corrected in the comments, 16 or 17, that the command module commander took his Rolex GMT with him, and he did not actually go down on the onto the moon as the commander of the ship on the moon, but he sent down his personal kit, the Rolex. So it went down, but I don't think it ever. There's no documentation that any other two watches other than the Bulova and the Omega were actually on the moon. An interesting fact is that I cannot think of his name right now. Gene Armstrong, I'm sorry, Neil Armstrong. From my understanding from our research, his Omega Speedmaster is still on the moon in the command module. It was used; they were using them as backup timers when they were lifting off and whatnot. And his is left behind. My understanding from my research is left behind, and it's still on the moon in the command module on the moon. So that would be a pretty interesting for the astronauts when they eventually go back to the moon to actually land on the moon and go there and actually get that watch. I mean, can you imagine what that thing would be worth? So the story goes with the Bulova is that Dave Scott on Gemini 15, sorry, not Gemini 15, Apollo 15, when he took with him his personal kit in 1972, the watch he took as a backup was the Bulova Lunar Pilot, which was a prototype at that time for Bulova. It did not have the current the current 262 kilohertz um, uh, movement in it, which is the movement that's currently there now. It had a automatic movement. Visual, I think that's how they pronounce it. Visual 72 was what I think they said was an automatic movement. So the two watches that were on the moon were both automatic watches, but it was a prototype. And the way it ended up getting on the moon, besides the Omega, is that when Dave Scott went to go EVA on the moon and do some stuff on the moon, the crystal on the Omega Seamaster popped off. So it broke. So he had to use his Bulova Lunar Pilot as a backup, and he wore that one on the moon. As I said earlier, there are other watches that have been into space. The Glycine Airman was into space. I think it was part of the Gemini project, worn by one of the astronauts. If you go on the website, you can see the pictures of it. You can see it on his flight suit when he came back down, but it actually did not go to the moon. So there are other watches that have gone into space, but have not gone to the moon. So the three reasons why I feel, and then we'll go over and do the review of the Lunar Pilot. The three reasons I feel that the Bulova Lunar Pilot is a better watch uh, overall in these three areas than the Omega Speedmaster is. Number three, price. The Lunar Pilot is probably one of the best chronographs that you can buy sub 1,000 out there on the market. That's just my opinion. And there's other commentators on YouTube that will probably back that up. I think Teddy Bolasar has even mentioned it. You know, to get into a solid quality chronograph in an automatic movement, you're going to be in the $2,000 range. Now, there are some phenomenal chronographs out there. The Zenith El Primero is top notch. I mean, that is just the pinnacle. The Rolex Daytona, the Seiko, not Speedmaster, the Seiko Speed Timer, the Citizen Caliber 2100. There are just some really, really top notch chronographs out there. So we're not comparing saying this one's better than other chronographs. I'm just saying that this one compared to the Omega Speedmaster when it comes to price of the two watches that landed on the moon, and there's no argument about this one, it is a better priced watch and what you get for it, because you get the Accutron movement in it, which is plus or minus 10 seconds a year and runs at 262 kilohertz with the tuning fork in it, and it's just an absolutely phenomenally timed watch. Whereas price wise for the Omega Speedmaster, there's to get into the least expensive Omega Speedmaster that you can get is 5,300, and it's going to have the Hesalite crystal on it. It's not actual crystal. I don't want to say it's plastic, but it's going to require a lot more care and a lot more maintenance than the Bulova, which has a crystal glass on it. On the Bulova, so as far as price is concerned, minimum to get into to Omega Speedmasters, you can be 5,300. Now you can, before the keyboard bandits get me, you can pick them up, yes, on the used market, and you can pick them up, maybe in the $3,000 range, $4,000 range. Same argument, you can pick up a brand new Bulova, even though if you go on Bulova's website over here over my left shoulder, they want 850, but you can pick them up through Amazon in the 550 range, brand new used market. You can pick them up even better price than that. So price wise, number three of the two, the Bulova is just hands down probably one of the best functioning, best timekeeping, best horological history chronograph that you can get for under $1,000, hands down. Number two, variations. The Bulova only comes in three variations. The original Bulova prototype was a 43 millimeter with a Valjoule 72 automatic movement in it, and it was 43 millimeters. And then when Dave Scott landed back in 1972 after that mission, he put that watch away, and for over 40 years it sat in private hands. And then he put it up for auction in 2017. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. And it sold for 1.6 million, and now it's in a private collection. After that, Bulova reintroduced the Lunar Pilot, and the first one they came out with was this one, which is the Lunar Pilot. It's 45 millimeter. It's all brushed, brush case, brush bracelet, and I'll do the review over here on the bench in a second. That was the first one they came out with. The biggest complaint that people had about it was that it was really large. They felt it was very large on a wrist, and it does wear larger than other watches, but I don't feel it wears too large. So about 8 months, a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, Bulova re-released a Lunar Pilot, or not re-released, but released a Lunar Pilot in 43 millimeter. And that is the original size of the Lunar Pilot that was on the moon. The original one, the prototype, was 43 millimeters. That one's 43 millimeters, but it's brushed and polished also. And then came out and they also have one that they call the Panda in 43, which is the blue and white one, which is very popular, and that's in 43 millimeter. So on the Omega side, in variations, you have over 18 different Omega Speedmasters, ranging from the base one, which is the Hesalite, closest to the original Moonwatch, to the all gold and the green face, and an all silver one, or titanium or platinum one to 60,000. There's 18 different variations of the Omega Speedmaster. With Bulova, there's just two. Well, if you want to count the color change, there's three, but there's basically two, the 45 and the 43. So if you want to stick to the horological history of it, 43 would be the one you want to get. So that's my number two reason why I feel that the Bulova is better than the Omega, because you don't have all these variations from the original. There is just the 45 and the 43. On the Omega side, you have the 18 different variations, and so I know people say variety is the spice of life. Well, sometimes too much variety creates too many decisions. And I know if I'm going to own the Omega Speedmaster, I want the same measurements, the same everything that was like the one on the moon. End of story. End of period. And the number one reason, and there's going to be no arguing this one, at least in my opinion, but I'm sure someone will hit me up in the comments. My number one reason that the Bulova Lunar Pilot is a better watch than the Omega Speedmaster is the Lunar Pilot didn't break on the moon. The Omega Speedmaster did. And it's well documented, it's well historied that the crystal popped off when Dave Scott was getting ready to go EVA on the moon, and he had to turn to his backup Lunar Pilot, and it was a prototype, and it formed flawlessly and did not break. So no huge controversy, I don't think. I am not, again, not knocking the Omega. I think it's a gorgeous, absolutely beautiful watch, and I'd love to own one. But the price point entry into that is it's getting ridiculous. You could probably pick one up on the used market, but to get a piece of horological history that was on the moon that you can wear sub 1,000, plus minus 10 seconds a day, there is no doubt that the Bulova Lunar Pilot is the watch of choice. If money's not being an object, then I'm getting an Omega Speedmaster. There's no doubt about it. But I would still own both. I would want to own the Lunar Pilot and the Omega Speedmaster because I want to own those two pieces of history. Now, there's a whole other talk. We can talk about all the watches that have been into space, from the Glycine to the Rolex to the Bulova to the Omega, and then you got the NASA shuttle missions where you've had G-Shock and other watches. But this is strictly just comparing the two watches that have documented been on the moon. So tell me if you disagree with me in the comments. Tell me if you agree with me. Tell me if I missed something wrong. Those three things: dependability, not breaking, variations of options to choose from, which I think in this particular case, I want the one closest to the original one that was on the moon, and price. I think those are three valid reasons that the Lunar Pilot is a better option than the Omega Speedmaster. So with that, light me up in the comments. Tell me what you think. But now let's jump over to the bench, and that's going to get a closer up personal look at the Omega. I'm sorry, not the Omega. I got Omega on the brain now. Take a look at the Bulova Lunar Pilot, and let's take a look at the dimensions and up close look and give you my overall opinions of it. And then we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up with what my final thoughts are on the Bulova Lunar Pilot. So to the bench. Okay, so here we are over on the bench. We're going to take a closer look at the Bulova Lunar Pilot up close and personal, and then I'll give you some wrist shots so you can see what it overall looks like. But it's just an absolutely gorgeous watch. Just looking at it, it's just a gorgeous watch looking at it. You have the hours, the seconds, and the minutes. Then you have a day-date window, and then you obviously have the tachymeter around the outside of the watch. It's just gorgeous. It steps down inside very nicely. You've got the seconds hand, 262 kilohertz. That's the tuning fork quartz movement in there. It's not your standard quartz movement, which makes it such an incredible watch. As I said earlier, plus or minus 10 seconds a year is absolutely phenomenal, and that comes from the Accutron technology, or the tuning fork technology they use in the quartz to have that watch be at 262 kilohertz to get that kind of accuracy. You have two pushers on the side. the start and the reset for the chronograph. And then you have everything on the watch is also brushed, and then you have the tuning fork on the crown. And you can see that the sapphire glass crystal, which does have some AR coating, but you can kind of see from my backlighting, it does reflect a little bit, but it does a pretty good job of breaking it out. The watch actually sticks up. It makes the watch thicker than it really is, because you can see that crystal sticks up pretty thick than most normal watches. So this is probably the most susceptible part to getting damage. Is a good whack on that crystal, you could potentially chip the sapphire, and that could cause a little bit of a hiccup. But before I go any further, let me get the dimensions on this one really quick. This one is the 45 millimeter option width here. I bought this before the 43 came out. Had I able to do it over again, I would have got the 43, because that one is the closest to the original Bulova prototype back in 1972 or 70. No, it would have been in 70, 71. The prototype they took up there. But this one is 45 millimeters case width, lug to lug. This is the biggest complaint about it is it's 52 millimeters, so it's going to wear a little bit larger than normal on your wrist. I don't have really a problem with it, but I know that's the biggest complaint that people have about it is the size that it feels on it. I have held the 43 and the 45 together in my hand, and it's very, very hard to tell the difference between the 43 and the 45. I wouldn't be surprised if someone gets the 43, and when it arrives, they think they screwed up and got the 45. So that's probably the biggest one there. And then the case thickness is 13.6 millimeters, and it actually wouldn't be that thick if the sapphire crystal didn't stick up as much as it did. To start the chronograph, you're going to push this upper timer. It has a distinctive click, so you can't just accidentally. You can see I'm pushing. You can't just accidentally just start the chronograph. You actually to push it, and you'll feel a distinctive click in your hand on your finger when it goes, and then it's going to be ticking off at the 1/100th or 1/10th of a second as it goes around for timing, and then the stop. Hit it one more time, and then the reset. It is not a flyback. It's going to spin around and come back to, you can see it's a little bit off right there. The way you adjust that is you take this crown, unscrew this crown. Actually, it's not a screw down crown. You take the crown all the way out, and you take it all the way out, and you push this upper pusher, and you see how it just clicked over? You can click it over to get it to where you need it to be. So depending on where it stops on your tachymeter. If it's not directly dead centered, you can center it up very easily. I know that can tend to be a complaint about chronographs. Is the hand doesn't stop right at the 12. It is a butterfly clasp. I actually the size is very, very well and very, very easy to my wrist, but it might be a little bit of a challenge for some people, just because when you have a butterfly clasp, they're not as easily to size just right as something with just the links. And the butterfly clasp, I think, just looks really nice when it's on the wrist. It just looks very, very elegant and classy. You can see the Bulova tuning fork on the bracelet also. This has got a lot of wear, and you can see that there's not a lot of scratches on the stainless steel. It holds up very, very well. There's not any scratches on the watch, and I wear this quite a bit, so it holds up very, very well. The other cool thing is on the back of the watch, you have, see if I can get it to adjust here. There we go. You have Apollo 15th, July 6th, 1971 to August 7th, 1971. You want EVA 3, August 2nd, 1971. And then it has the Hadley Riley and the Apophis, I think that's how you pronounce it, where they were on the moon. And then it has the actual coordinates of where they're on the moon. And then you have your standard stuff. There it is. Water resistance is 50 meters. Then you have your standard info around the screw down case back on the performance, the water resistance, the case material, and then the serial number. Okay, there it is on my 6 1/4 inch wrist. I don't feel that it's too big at all. I like watches a little bit on the larger side, but 45 is max for me. Anything beyond that, it's just too damn big. I know people like to wear up to 50, but I just don't have the wrist for that. But you can see as far as sitting on my wrist, it sits very flat, very nice. It's snug. There's no overhang. The lug to lug, for me, I think is just fine. I don't see any issues with it. I see it laying You can see just a little bit right there on the wrist, but if I push it down, it's kind of there. So you're going to get a little bit of overhang depending on your wrist size, but I'm not getting any overhang. It's just I don't have it on real tight. If I had it on tight, it would be just fine. But I don't like to wear this one. It's tighter in the summer, but now we're here in the winter months, so it's going to be a little looser because my wrist is going to be a little bit thinner. But overall, shaking it, it does not slide up and down my wrist at all. I think it fits. I think it looks just awesome. I get tons of compliments on it all the time. I just think it's an absolute killer watch, and I don't think you can go wrong picking up the Bulova Lunar Pilot. So without further ado, let's go back over to the studio and wrap this up, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts on the Bulova Lunar Pilot and why you need to pick one up. All right, folks, there you go. Well, there is my review of the Bulova Lunar Pilot and my little controversial 3 reasons why I feel that it is a better option than the Omega Speedmaster. It's a better watch than the Omega Speedmaster, just in those 3 areas. Dependability, did not break on the moon. The Omega did break. Now, I'm not saying all of them break, but it did break, so that's why I'm picking that. I'm just saying that one, so that's my number 1. Number 2 is variation. There's too many, to me, there's too many variations of the Omega Moon Watch, not counting the Speedmaster. There's just a ton of them, way past 18 if you include all the Speedmasters. But of the Moon Watch, there's just too many variations, and I get why they did that. You got to keep bringing out something different to keep selling that watch and keep moving that watch forward. But I think the horology and the history of the watch alone should be enough to sell that watch for people to want to own it, especially the people who are into space and into NASA and the moon and all that. I don't think you need 18 variations of a watch to sell the horology of the history of the watch. Omega has such a solid history with that watch and the Gemini and the Apollo program and NASA that I don't think you need all those variations to keep selling a watch that the watch itself, the original Speedmaster layout, should be just fine. Other than maybe updating it with the Sapphire versus the Hesalite, I don't think you need all those variations to sell that watch. It should sell itself. So that was my number 2 point. And then number 3 was price point. Obviously, sub 1,000. The Bulova Lunar Pilot is probably one of the best watches, chronographs you can get in the sub 1,000 category for quality, for the history of the watch, being on the moon, and the accuracy plus minus 10 seconds a year. I just think you can't beat that. Omega cannot touch Bulova when it comes to that price point. The entry-level price point for an Omega new, I know there's a gray market, folks. I get it. I'm talking new. New Bulova, not new Bulova, new Omega is going to run you a minimum of $5,300 up to $60,000 to pitch one of the, depending on which one of the 18 variations you're going to get. But I don't know why you would get any other variation. If you're getting it for the history and being a watch that was on the moon, then you get the one that was closest to the original one as possible. Otherwise, you just get the other variations because you just like those variations and you just want that Speedmaster moon watch, and you're just like, I don't care. I'm going to drop 60 grand on it and buy one that's nothing like the one that was on the moon. So I am not knocking Omega. I would love to own one. Maybe someday I'll be in a position to own one. But in those 3 areas, I think the Bulova Lunar Pilot is a better option and a better watch than the Omega Speedmaster. People are going to light me up in there. Hopefully you've watched the video, you've listened to the whole thing, you just didn't instantly jump to conclusions and you just fired away on that keyboard and lit me up. But if you did, I knew making this one was going to be controversial and I was going to ruffle some feathers for sure, especially there's probably some hardcore Omega fanboys that are just going to tear me up. But again, I am not knocking the Omega. I am praising them. I think it's an option watch. I just think of the 2 that are on the moon, when you compare those 3 different variables, those 3 different things, the Bulova Lunar Pilot stands on its own over the Omega Speedmaster. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but in my opinion, I'm not wrong. That's why I'm putting this video out. But if you don't agree with me, that's okay. I appreciate all the dialogue, and I look forward to dialoguing with people in the comment sections. But hey, I want to thank each and every one of you for sticking with me and watching these videos each week and giving me your awesome comments, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I take it all. You're not hurting my feelings. This old combat veteran, you ain't gonna hurt my feelings at all. I enjoy it. So thank you again for watching. Thank you for helping the channel grow. Everybody stay safe. You have a great holidays. Stay safe. Be careful out there during the holidays. It's a crazy time. Maybe Santa's going to drop a Bulova Lunar Pilot, or if you're really lucky, maybe drop an Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch in your stocking this year. But until next week for the next video, everybody have a happy Merry Christmas, and we'll be seeing you next week. I'm diving into watches, and I'm out.